Nobody's here.
Evening.
Oh, yeah.
Hello, Judy.
Oh,
Hello.
I'm the first one.
I think you are the first one here. Yes.
Oh, that's good. Yeah.
Yeah.
How are you? Oh, good. I'm going to go get my Bible.
Okay, go
Okay.
ahead. Yep. So good evening to those of you who are tuning in to the recorded broadcast. I'm Pastor Lou Kilgore, and I'm pastor here at the High Mountain Presbyterian Church, where we read the Bible. We try to read it with an open mind and read it in critical review of what we've been told it says, and we also read it with an eye to trying to figure out what it does say in its context and in our context. So if you're new to our group, welcome aboard. We have some Zoom members who will be joining us momentarily, and one of them already is here. So welcome, Judy.
Yes, thank you. Happy to be here.
Good. And how was your week?
Uh, like Kate Middleton says, good days and bad days. Right.
Yeah.
But now is a good day because I'm here. Right.
Good. Good. Yeah.
It's only a bad day. It's only a bad day when I read the newspaper.
Believe me, I understand that too.
Oh, my goodness, my goodness. Interesting article on the place of the Supreme Court in the campaign now. Which is a good idea to do. Yeah. Because three justices will be in their late 70s,
Yeah.
close to 70s. So it would be an opportunity for whoever is president, to appoint new justices, which could be problematic depending on who the president is. Yeah. Yeah. That's the first time I've seen the issue raised like that. Yeah. And apparently there's a group called Stand Up America. I mean, there's so many different groups, there's so many different names yeah. So, yeah.
Yeah, the future. I haven't found any roadmaps to the future. I just, and I try to. I've been doing this on purpose to try to put myself.
Hi, Barbara.
Hi, Barbara.
Hello.
Try to put myself into previous times of uncertainty. When war was ravaging even our own United States during the Civil War, and try to think about how did people hold up? Where was their confidence, and what were their ideas about what gave them hope for a present day? Because their present day seemed very much more problematic than mine. I mean, I can worry about some things, but I don't live day to day in political strife. I don't.
Yeah.
Maybe I will. Maybe that will come. I don't know.
I know. Many changes.
Yeah. How are you, Barbara?
I'm doing okay. I'm sure surprised Debbie isn't on yet, but we're just texting about tomorrow, so I'm assuming she's on her way. She didn't say she's not coming.
Oh, okay.
Now, do you folks do the same thing on Wednesday morning that we do on Tuesday night in terms of the placement of the Psalms and so forth? Are you on the same Psalm, or are you on different parts of the Bible?
No, we're reading. We're trying to get finished. Let's see. Where are we in the Sunday? Wednesday?
Jeremiah.
Yeah, we're in the prophets. Right. We've been reading ahead in the prophets. We read for a long time. We read all of Isaiah, and struggled with how to listen to Isaiah. What does it mean to? And now we're in Jeremiah. These two.
Debbie. Hi, Debbie.
Prophets. So.
Hello.
Anyway, you're welcome to join us for the Wednesday morning class. It's 10 o'clock, and we do it on Zoom, but we also then have a couple people present in person, which is also very nice. Hello, Debbie.
Yeah.
Hello.
Nice to see you.
Nice to see you too. Finally, I'm sorry I'm late.
You're welcome,
here.
whenever. Right.
Late is relative.
Right.
Okay, just a couple minutes, yeah.
We're
Anyway.
just getting started, so our reading for tonight, if I am right, I've been reading now for an hour, trying to get ready, but I think that our reading tonight is it 56?
So I think we did 54 and 55 last
Right,
week.
we did, I know we did, I felt fairly certain that we had done 55, I recognize that. So tonight we are in Psalm 56 and reading, I want to say a little bit before we get to the reading of it, in the commentary that I'm using to sort of guide me through some of what can be difficult to crack in terms of the meaning, they put they interspersed a little chapter, just a little expansive reading called Enemies in the Psalms. And they gathered up from various scholars who've done translations over the years, a sort of summary of how many of the Psalms, especially tonight's and last week's, address enemies. You know, they're just full of the idea that, you know, the struggle for the believer isn't just the difficulty of accessing and trusting a God you can't see and you can't trust, you can't touch, but the presence of enemies. And in the variety of ways in which enemies are described and all the things that enemies do. And often these individual psalms talk about enemies. They're not real specific about what makes this person an enemy, but there's this kind of formulaic idea about how to deal with enemies. And these enemies seem fearful, you know. I don't know what they're afraid the enemies can do to them. Sometimes it's their reputation. Sometimes it's their physical suffering. Sometimes enemies are, according to this summary, sometimes enemies are there, like Job's friends, in the presence of illness and disease to make it worse, you know, to just take an already suffering situation and then come along with their smart alecky ideas about why you're sick and what it's supposed to mean. And meanwhile, the poor sick person's trying to defend themselves and say, look, I'm just sick, okay? Would you leave me alone? I don't need you compounding it. So that's also, in many of the Psalms, that is the kind of enemy that there is. The other varieties of enemies that they talk about are enemies of the individual. Now, sometimes you can tell this is a psalm of an individual who fears for his life, or he feels he's going to be run out of town. But there also is this word, enemies, which is enemies of a nation, enemies of a group. So it's foreign powers who are invading or threatening the existence of Israel or of a portion of Israel. And so then in that way, the idea of enemies takes on a very warlike meaning. So that's just a little inserted commercial to say these are some of the repeated themes that come up over and over and over again in the reading of these Psalms. And I think you'll see they're sort of here in the context of chapter 56, which my commentary labels this psalm, trust in God and fear no person, which would be great, wouldn't it? So, unless you have something you want to say about what I've said, then why don't we get a volunteer to jump in and read Psalm 56.
Okay, I will. Be merciful unto me, O God, for man would swallow me up. Ye fighting daily oppresseth me. Mine enemies would daily swallow me up. For they be many that fight against me, O thou most high. What time I am afraid, I will trust in thee. In God I will praise his word. In God I will put my trust. I will not fear what flesh can do unto me. Every day they wrest my words. All their thoughts are against me for evil. They gather themselves together. They hide themselves. They mark my steps when they wait for my soul. Shall they escape by iniquity? In thine anger cast down the people, O God. Thou tellest my wanderings. Put thou my tears unto thy bottle. Are they not in thy book? When I cry unto thee, then shall mine enemies turn back. This I know, for God is for me. In God will I praise his word. In the Lord will I praise his word. In God have I put my trust. I will not be afraid what man can do unto me. Thy vows are upon me, O God. I will render praises unto thee. For thou hast delivered my soul from death. Will not thou deliver my feet from falling, that I may walk before God in the light of the living?
Okay. So, anybody have any comments you want to make or observations?
Depression. Slightly assertion. Trust. Free. Instructions.
So, let me ask a question, or maybe I'll start by telling a little story. I think the last time that I was physically afraid of another person was when I was 8 years old. I lived in the city of Lambertville, and I used to have to walk to the Third Ward School, which was about 20 blocks north. And on the way, there were a group of somewhat older than me guys. I didn't really know them, but I was afraid of them. I was afraid, and they weren't unhappy that I was afraid of them. And so I would try to strategize to never be alone on the same block as them. And then I had gotten a new bicycle, which I was planning to ride to school and lock up in school. And I came out one morning to get on my bike and ride to school, and it was gone. It had been stolen out of the yard. And so that was a big blow, but I walked to school, and on my way home, I saw one of these guys from that group that I was afraid of riding on my bike. And I'm telling you this story because I don't remember any other time in my life where the words of this psalmist and the description of the person that he fears resonated in my life. Now, the way the story ends is that I had 3 bigger, older brothers, and I told them that this guy was outside on the street riding my bike, and they proceeded to go out, the 3 of them together, and take the bike back from him forcefully. But even after that, I had my bike back, but I had to live in this little town, walk its streets, and these thugs were ruling the streets, afraid of nobody. And so I created a capacity. It created a capacity in me to be afraid of an enemy. I was afraid. But I don't know any I don't know of any other time when that's true. And I want to know from you, is your life like that? Have you encountered one or a group of people that you have been afraid of?
Well, I remember when I was a junior in college, and and I went to France with a group of women, and and we were in Paris. There was a series of steps that led to, and then there was a flat area in a restaurant, and the women, there must have been about 12 of them. We were all sitting in the restaurant. It was dark night, and I had forgotten my pocketbook, and so I left the group and I walked out on the flat, down the stairs, and I went into the van that we were traveling in, and I got my pocketbook. I went outside the van, going up the stairs, and suddenly somebody came out of the dark, grabbed my ankles, and started up my legs, and I took my pocketbook and I never saw the face of the person, but I hit this person over and over and over on the head and called out. And of course, in Paris, if you're just having a skirmish with your lover or something. Anyway, I kept banging on this person's head, calling out for help, and nobody came. But eventually, the man started down the stairs very quickly, and I was drained of energy, but I got myself back to the restaurant, and I remember that was the first time that I was very afraid. And after that, to your point, and even now, when it's very dark, I will look over my shoulders alone to make sure that there's nobody on the street, whatever. So instances like that, experiences like that do leave a mark, even as you're an adult, they leave a mark. Yeah.
Yeah.
That was the only time that I was really afraid. Yeah. And when you're alone and there's nobody else there, I think that also compounds the experience. Yeah.
Anybody else? Barbara, Debbie, experiences of being afraid?
Yeah, the one thing that comes to mind, and I was an adult, I was probably in my 50s at the time, and I was in France again, and we were walking the streets in a very tiny little village, and there were 4 of us, and someone walked out of the apartment or the house and had a Red Sox, I think, shirt on. And my friend, who was, he was always very friendly with everyone, made a comment. And the next thing you know, we're talking to this guy and he's telling us all this stuff. And we were talking to him about eating. I think we went in to his house and he gave us a bottle of wine. We're drinking it and we were asking about a good place to eat lunch in the town. And he said, "Oh no, I have a perfect place." And he had, I think it was a Volvo that he had shipped over. So it had the Boston Red Sox sign on it. And so the 4 of us got in this car with this guy who we had no idea who he was. He was an American. And he told us all these stories about his family did this, that, and the other thing. And I'm going, yeah, right. And so we're driving, and I'm thinking, am I in a Harlan Coben book or something that we're going to wind up in some cabin? And he's going to meet his friends who are going to take us and ransom us or something. And it turned out that, he brought us to a very quaint restaurant. My friend did check out, and whatever he told us about the family was fine. But I guess I wasn't really, I kind of thought, what are we going to do? But there were 4 of us. So it wasn't like being alone.
Right.
like Judy's talking about, that you just, you just don't know what to do. It's scary, very scary.
I got a story too. When I started high school, which for us, for some reason, started high school in ninth grade. No, 10th grade, 11, 12, yeah. 3 years of high school. Don't ask me why. Anyway, before that, I had grown up in a small town, and our high school was in a city, Hackensack. And so, not frightened, looking forward to starting school. Not too long after I started, there was a group of girls coming down the hall behind me, pushed me hard, and said, "Hey, you knocked into me. We're going to wait for you outside the school this afternoon. Be ready." Like, big threat. Of course I was frightened, but I didn't want to, I wanted to pretend. I was trying to have a lot of bravado. But when I left the school, I did look around real quick and got the heck out of there pretty fast. And that fear stayed with me for weeks. Nothing ever happened. The following year, I started the chorus. I was in the chorus. So I'm sitting there, and all of a sudden I see a girl sit down next to me. It was the girl who started the whole thing the year before. She never let on that she knew me, and I have a feeling she didn't realize that it was me that she had picked on. And we became really good friends. I never mentioned it to her. She never said anything to me. But I thought, I let myself be frightened for a good long time for nothing. Anyway, just goes to show, you never know. Just kids being kids, I guess. But it can be scary when you don't know the territory.
Yeah, and the ability of one human being to instill the fear in another. I mean, this is it. We're humans, right? And we don't have armadillo skin. We don't have natural defensive weapons that we carry, and we are easy to threaten. We are. And I'm very grateful that I think I can say this. I mean, the world I live in, the world I've lived in for my 69 years, is a world in which the threat of violence is very, it's underneath. It's not there. It's there, but it's, I don't face having to run home to get away from people beating me up. I don't, and I haven't in my life. I've had a few other experiences, especially, my greatest encounter with violence in the world I live in has been in high school. I mean, I don't know about you all, but high school was a very violent place for me, and I was in 100 Central High School in Flemington, out in the suburbs. But it was a violent place. There were fights all the time. And I don't know, I learned to carry around a deep sense of, let's be smart, be afraid. Be afraid in certain situations and stay out of them because you are afraid.
I think there's much more fear today. You sometimes think about these children, in these schools where these crazy people come in with shotguns. I have a granddaughter works for CNN, and she wrote a story about the Arkansas shooting, and she interviewed one of the families, and it was all about the fear and what they experienced. And I mean, you pick up the newspaper today, and it's just. It's the same. It's everywhere. Kids go to school now, and they've got security people at their doors, and metal detectors, and so you see it in the schools. You see it in the churches and the temple. I mean, you read about Walmart. I mean, you don't it's everywhere. And we never had that before. I mean, at least when I was growing up, in the 40s and 50s, it wasn't there.
Do you feel it? I know we talk about it and we have illustrations of it, but do you feel afraid during your day or your week? Do you feel afraid?
Yeah. I don't feel afraid, but sometimes when you go into a supermarket after you've read, something like that, maybe you look around a little bit. No, I think we are lucky because we live in communities where we have not experienced that kind of thing. I think if you live in a community where you have had, children shot at or mock shootings, I think it would be different. So I think your setting is important. The environment that you're in, I think, is very important. Yeah.
I agree. I think the incident I was talking about, I grew up in Maywood, which is a real tiny town. Everybody knew each other. And for some reason, we didn't start high school until 10th grade. So we missed a year, and we were going to Hackensack, which was a big city for us. And it was a different environment. And I think the kids that were already in the high school there all had been there for a year before us, and we were interlopers coming from Maywood. Who knew, So it was like, pick on the kids that are coming to invade our school. And that's what I felt that it must have been. It was probably, you're in our territory, that kind of a thing. And I think the psalm writer here is kind of feeling some of that too, isn't it? It's supposed to be David, yes? And he's in a foreign territory. I mean, sometimes when you don't know the environment, there is a certain amount of fear.
Yeah, and to go into it, part of what this person is afraid of is, there's stories being told about them. People are making up stories about him that aren't true. And then I guess the risk is that a lot of people would start to come after them, thinking that, he's a terrible person or something like that. And that's often how it goes too, I think, even in school settings or in neighborhoods. People move into a new neighborhood, exacerbate maybe by cultural differences and race differences, but, it's, I don't know, it reminds me of the chicken pen. You always pick on the new chicken, just there's a need to do a pecking order. There's a need to put people in place. And I don't know. It reminds me almost of our animal nature more than it does our higher rational nature.
Right.
It's just.
Yeah. I think it's the era too. It just calls to mind, again, it was, I don't know, maybe 25, 30 years ago. I was teaching at Passaic Community College, and I was teaching a course that ended at 10 o'clock at night, the course on Steinbeck. Anyway, and I had absolutely no fear at all. I would go down the steps. It was dark when I finished my course, and get into my car at the parking lot, and I was alone. I had no fear at all. Today, would I teach at 10 o'clock, all by myself at 10 o'clock and at Passaic Community College? No, I wouldn't. I would be afraid. So I think the era too, was one where we developed, certain biases or whatever, certain survival instincts. Yeah.
There's a.
I think what you're talking about too before with the setting, I've been reading, and I believe Debbie is also reading Doris Kearns Goodwin's book, An Unfinished Romance, is it, Debbie?
An
And-
unfinished love affair, I think, or?
And they were talking about Dick, her husband, Dick Goodwin, was in Chicago during the convention in 1968, and he's working for McCarthy, and he saw the police. He was going to the floor where all the workers were, and he saw police all over the place. And the next thing he knew, police were grabbing all the volunteers and him and bringing them downstairs and hitting them while they're doing it, because there had been stuff which he didn't realize. There had been stuff thrown from the hotel, but they really never figured out where it was coming from. But he was mentioning that, he got McCarthy to come down and talk to the police and, let them go. But he was saying what it must have been like during civil rights actions in the South all the time, and people having to go through, when they were doing nonviolent protests, and how, frightening it must have been for everyone. So I think it's not only that it's a different era, I think it was a different setting. Yeah.
Right.
And
The
where,
tensions were already high. I mean,
right,
people knew they were coming into a fraught situation, so
Right.
it didn't take much to start it.
right,
It's so funny. I keep thinking of all these experiences I hadn't thought of in such a long time. But right after the Supreme Court decision, I was teaching in the South, and I was in my 20s. It was my first job, teaching 8th grade, and a little boy came in with a big white box, and in it were the robes of his granddaddy, who was the Grand Dragon of the Klan in Bay County in Panama City. I, 21, 22, I didn't know what to do. I said, oh, fine, put him in the back of the room, and you want to say throw him in the garbage. But anyway, but it was a time when there was a woman who was a librarian in Panama City at the time, and she and I became friendly, and she said to me, be careful, Judy, you're from the North, and they needed teachers, so they took us, from the North. But she said, be careful what you say and, what you do in the classroom. And I had the nephew of George Barnett, it was in Alabama and Wallace and Territory. So yeah, when I think about it, there were different instances, where you become more timid because sure, what the territory, what you talk about the word territory, Debbie did, yeah, what it is.
And
Right.
and I hate to say it like this, but again, as what I think is overly simplistic and really hard to translate, is with the psalmist then says, I'm going to trust in God and I'm not going to be afraid. Like, I want to go, well, okay. I mean, how does that work? How does that work? Really, how does that work? If you're in one of these situations where a race riot is about ready to break forth, or where you're surrounded by police officers who themselves are afraid and are beginning to swing their batons to try to beat back people, like really, somewhere in there, what are you supposed to do? Drop to your knees and pray and say, God, I trust you, and now please help me, because I'm not going to be afraid. I'll trust in the Lord, and I will not be afraid. Really? Does that work?
Well, the psalm writer is at a distance from the incidents and sitting down to write the psalm. So with a little distance between you and the danger, it's
Right.
easy to say that, but probably not in the heat of the moment. No.
Well, okay, so then maybe it would apply if there had been signs of danger and the guy survived. but then he's sitting down writing and realizing that the threat may be over, but the fear remains. The fear is there. And then, so it's a declaration, right? I will not be afraid. I will not be afraid. And I get it. I know that our hearts are led by our mouths. If we can say something enough, we do this in all the practice of all of religion. We recite the words of faith. I will trust in the Lord in all situations, and I will do this, and you repeat it. In some ways, the more you repeat it, if you have a cadence in repeating it, it can actually maybe build a sense of fearlessness in the inner self, right? I mean, that's what we do. Or
I think I'm more inclined to just pray to God to save me. And I'm not that fearless at the moment.
Right, forget about it. I remember, I forget what the exact circumstance was, but I was feeling entirely overwhelmed in my work in the Bound Brook Church, and the organist there in the choir was quite good, and they did a version of the Lord is my strength, of whom shall I be afraid? The Lord is my light. The Lord is my light, and whom shall I be afraid? And it was set in like a choral repetition, where they kept coming back with the same words and then a variation like good orchestration does. And I kept listening, and I realized in listening, of whom shall I be afraid? And I was afraid. I was afraid. I was afraid for what was going to happen, what wasn't going to happen. And as the choir sang and as they repeated it, I grew a bond between the language of that song and my own life experience. I actually felt a fearlessness coming into me. I felt that the fear was overcome and that in its place there was, not for anybody else's, I didn't say anything to anybody else about what's going on in me, but I could feel faith replacing fear. I could feel it. And I think back to it every now and then. I'd like to have that choir sing that one more time. I'd like to.
You should have recorded it.
Yeah, I know. I should have. To be able to repeat that whole thing, and I look sometimes. I know there's a hymn in the hymn book which is based on it, but I can't find it because I want somebody else to sing that hymn to me in the moments of my fear. And scripture verses, they talk about this dilemma all the time. Loving God and that perfect love casts out fear. Right? Mm-hmm. And I am a firm believer as a pastor. They say you shouldn't have just a view of how to understand the Bible, but you should carry around in you a basic understanding of human beings. It's as important to understand, have a variety or a version of understanding of human beings, what makes human beings tick, what is good for us. And I've often said, the enemy of all of us is not out there. The enemy of all of us is our capacity to fear. Because when we are afraid, we are, we're mindless. We become, we're like, I've had a lot of dogs in my life, and one of the things is you can have a very well-trained dog, but boy, when that dog gets afraid, when that dog is really afraid, it's dangerous. And to try to restore a sense of well-being in the lives of human beings means you've got to figure out how to address our fear. And that's the playground we play in, faith and fear. If we're all wrapped up in fear, we can't be really any help to our fellow human beings. We don't, we panic, we turn inward, we become greedy and hoarding, and we're no good to anybody. But if words can be said or experiences can be had that help people individually or congregations or nations to just be calm, not be afraid, even when there are those out there that are trying to stir up fear. I don't know. That's my speech.
Well, isn't that what's motivating? I don't want to get into politics, but motivating some of the people who surrounded Trump and were very weighty and very strong in their criticism of him, have then turned around and are part of his coterie. Because you wonder, is it fear that they will be denounced by him, trounced by him? I mean, what makes, I often wonder what makes somebody like a Giuliani, who was the beloved mayor of the world, I mean, a legacy that he had, suddenly give that up. Was it fear, or was it more greed, what you're talking about, Lou? A lust for power and hoping that, he would be the attorney general. I mean, I don't know, but it seems that fear of what could happen to their families, or threats, or vilification, I don't know. But it seems like that's, when you look at the behavior of some of these people, are they afraid of him? Is that why they, on day one, will denounce him, and on day two, applaud him?
I think
Is it fear?
I think at this point in my life, to be honest with you, I hear what you're talking about. I see it, I see how fear builds the possibility of votes. But to be honest with you, I want to say, even to people that I agree with their politics, I want to say, okay, easy on the fear, just easy on the fear, because politicians of every stripe are tempted to use fear to motivate people. And so the demagoguery that's going on about Donald Trump, I mean, true or false, there's no question about it. His opponents are creating, myths and stories about how, it's going to be the end of the world. And I want to say, easy now, go easy. I get it. There's things we don't want to see. There's things that maybe you don't think should happen. But it just worries me that the fear-mongering now on both sides, or all 8 sides, if there's 8 sides to this, is going to lead all of us somewhere where none of us want to go. Win, lose, or draw. We're going to be left with, I think it's a very skewed idea of what all of our places are in the world. I mean, the poor are the poor, and their situation is desperate. It is. But the people who are suffering from the injustice of unfair courts and decisions, okay, but that's across political lines. That's not about political parties. But what I see happening is this massive, the pushing off into, these great big groups of people believing that the other side, no matter what their point of view is, but that they're going to gain by making the other side seem like if they win, it's going to be the end of the world as we know it.
It's going to be the apocalypse. And then I heard recently that there is a group called the Survivalists, and that they are, building bunkers, as at World War II.
Yeah.
what motivates that? Fear of a nuclear, explosion.
Well,
No,
that movement's been around a while. My
Yeah.
brother and sister-in-law were survivalists when they graduated from Colorado State University. Now, I don't know, they bought 13 acres of land and built a bunker, and they put their own survival. I mean, God bless them,
oh, that's all.
It's out there. It is out there. And of course, there are all kinds of radical ideas about what's coming next. The militaristic groups that are out in the woods in the great northwest of the United States. There's all kinds of groups of people who are ready for the end to come. And not the least of which are some tracts of the evangelical fundamentalist church. They're looking in Israel right now for the great betrayal, which they say is talked about in Revelation, where Israel will make a pact with some false leader, and as a result of that pact with a false leader, they will all be subjected to slavery, and then the heavens are going to break open, the trumpet's going to sound, and God is going to come riding in through the east and west gate. I'm sorry, we've got to have a way, and I don't know what else to call it, but a more rational way of navigating through our lives, a rational way that helps us to quantify our fears. If I was a woman today, I would be afraid of the loss, especially if I was pre-childbearing age woman, I would be afraid of the loss of self-determination in the event of rape or like terrible pregnancies, tubal pregnancies, and I would be afraid. And I would be out there arguing to say, come on, you can't do this, But a lot of what's motivating these complete anti-abortion, the bans, and then now all the in vitro fertilization bans, what's behind a lot of that is a rationale that is growing, I'm sorry to say it, my friends, but it's growing out of a kind of Christianization, a version of Christianity. And I'm a Christian pastor. I mean, what is going on? What is happening?
Into the Middle East.
I thought the great motivation and the great clarion call of Jesus was a motivation towards freedom and towards self-determination. I don't know. I thought that was supposed to be the genius of Christianity as it arrived here in the United States. Diversity of religion. I mean, it wasn't that diverse, but now, there's a fear of everybody. And, they're just, I don't know.
That's right.
I just wish we could all calm down a little bit.
Be nice. Don't you think a lot of this anti-female self-determination is a fear on the part of a lot of men that they can't control women anymore? That women don't need men as much as they used to, or they need them in different ways, and they feel they want to go back to a time that they believed was better, when women had fewer choices in their lives?
Yes to everything you said. Yes. I think it's a societal adjustment. I think it's being demanded of men in particular, and it's also being demanded of women. Women, we're used to living in the Northeast where women are able and want to, my wife's a member, an officer of a corporation in New York City. She works, she's independent on her own, but, in my family, in my extended family, my brothers all got married right after they graduated from high school. And they married girls, some of them who were still in high school.
Oh.
And their families right now, the girls in their families are not being encouraged to look for jobs or whatever, but in the name of God and Jesus Christ, they're being encouraged to seek their unique calling in life to be a wife and to be a mother. And what's wrong with that? You know, what is wrong with that? There's nothing wrong with that. And it's evil that is convincing people that, you know, you should put off having children and you should, you know, I don't know. All the values of contemporary society are all thrown in a big bin, soaked with gasoline and burned. Like they just don't accept it. So, and also, I don't know anymore. One time I was very in touch with it, but most of my siblings, their grandchildren are homeschooled. They don't go to public school. And the reason they don't go to public school is because they believe that secular teachers, you know, the teachers we want to talk about and say, look at them, they're great devoted people and they really care about people. No, they're secularists. These teachers in these public schools are not hired because they can teach your children how to live a life of faith. They are hired to teach your children how to live a secular life, which doesn't have anything to do with faith.
But if they post the 10 Commandments,
Right.
there you go.
That's right. Particularly if they put Hebrew.
Yeah. Put them in Hebrew. Let them read them in Hebrew.
So I saw something on the internet where they said, okay, we're going to post. It was all in Hebrew.
I was just I had lunch with a friend who's Orthodox Jew yesterday, and we were talking about that. And I said, which version of the 10 Commandments are they thinking of putting in? She goes, yeah, there are more than one version. And so we were kind of laughing about that because I know there's at least 3 different versions, right?
That's right. Yes,
Lou?
there are. Yep, there are.
So what's the standardized version? She was kind of laughing about it too. She says, we have a lot of commandments. Leviticus is full of them. We don't have to limit it to 10. You know, you could post all of them if you want. But I think it's that fear that a segment of our society is losing control over another segment of society. And they don't want that to happen. And I don't know. I guess I understand in a way their fear, but I don't think there's anything terribly wrong with our secular society. You have a choice. You can homeschool or you can go to public school. What's wrong with that? I don't understand. If no one's forcing you to do the things you don't want, no one's forcing you to get an abortion, no one's forcing you to have a gay marriage, no one's forcing, it's all your choice. What's wrong with choice? I don't get it. But there's a certain amount of fear, I guess, that, you know, our children will see that and suddenly become gay, or they decide they want to, you know, I don't know, have a completely different lifestyle. I don't get it. Anyway.
I do think, I agree. I don't know what will come of it, but I think, I don't know, years ago, sociologists pointed out that the difficulty of current and future time is going to be that there was from the 1900s to the 1950s, there were changes that were happening in American society and American culture. Clearly changes, and there were some big changes. Travel by air was, all kinds of things. The difficulty that's going on that we feel right now, that we are reacting to, and people are reacting in a variety of ways, is the rate of change which is happening in our existing world it's not just the rate is faster, it's that the rate itself is changing and accelerating. Change is coming at a phenomenal rate. We don't have time to develop traditions and accepted standards and this is how we're supposed to behave, this is how you're supposed to handle when a phone call comes in the middle of a conversation. We don't have time to invent what politeness means now. We don't have time to invent the interpretations because while we're working out our cultural kind of, okay, well, this is the way we'll handle it, this is what polite society will do, another change comes along. And the changes are happening, not just in technology, but in where we live, how we spend our days.
How people dress too. Mm-hmm.
How they
Yeah.
what?
How they dress.
Right.
The format.
Yes, totally how they dress. I mean, and we don't have time to develop a standard. We don't. I mean, Laura and I watched some of these online videos about, you can see historical videos back to when, during the Elizabethan period, when the standard of how to dress and how to dress when you were where you were, it was so evenly interpreted, everybody knew what was appropriate. And it was agreed to. It's all agreed to. We don't have any of that now. We don't have, because it's all changed.
I remember the introduction of a casual Friday. What could be worn on casual Friday. And then it deteriorated and people began wearing, jeans with
pajamas.
Yeah, practically, right. And that was casual Friday. But it didn't start out that way, right?
No. I think that the field of medical ethicists is a fraught one because my son-in-law worked in that field for many years, and medical ethics just can't keep up with all the new treatments and new things coming in the medical world. We can do such wonderful things now, but are they all morally ethical? They're not, and we have to figure this out. And it takes a while for that, practice to catch up with the advancements in medicine. And I think that scares a lot of people too, because look what we can do with IVF and all these other
AI.
treatments. And it's kind of scary, I guess. I don't know.
Is it playing God?
Well, yeah, in some ways, yes. I think some people's idea of, taking the place of God. How dare we decide the things that should be in God's realm?
Right.
Well, I think
So we have no medicine?
no.
Now, again, where is the line?
Well, that's what's happening for women. They don't want you to have an abortion. But in the meantime, you can't even have a D&C if you're bleeding out. Please, where is the common sense in medical treatment? So, yeah.
Not take pills.
I think, this phrase, we're playing God, that begs a question for me, which is, do we believe that our ethics and our sense of morality actually came from God? Like, I think it's always been us. Society has always made the decisions about what's ethical and what's moral. We've always done that. We thought somehow this was given to us by God, but look in the Bible. You're going to find 10 commandments, but you're not going to find much else to guide you in terms of all the moral decisions, most of which the right and wrongness of them are made by cultural heritage. It's right and wrong based on what your culture has been, the life you have lived. We have the blending of cultures today like never before. The world is, I think one of the historians talked about how the first fast change that took place on the globe for human beings was when the donkey was domesticated. Because for the first time in human history, a human being could travel more than one day, because they had a beast of burden to carry the supplies that were necessary for the second day of the journey. And that, like, when you're the historian and you look at the impact that just the domestication of the donkey had on the globe and on the primitive cultures that had never seen someone that looked different than them, had never heard another language spoken, and then now, you can fly around the world and be back for supper. And so the cultural fluidity has also led to us seeking guides for morality and for ethics. We don't
Right.
have time to develop them because they're changing so fast.
We're being warned now about AI. So
Right.
now even our intelligence is going to be out of our control, perhaps, and we're trying to figure out how to cope with that. So things are coming at us, so quickly. So that does makes a lot of people frightened
Yeah.
of what could be the future.
And I think,
I'm more frightened of global warming than I am of AI.
me too.
I agree.
Me too, but the current world spends a lot of time denying it instead of trying to cope with it. We're still hopeful that this is just an unusually hot summer.
Oh, no.
This is like, we're still there. I still remember that it was a senator or a House of Representatives who brought a snowball into
Yes,
the
Senator Inhofe.
right.
Look, I have a snowball. I'm like, yeah.
So global warming is a lie because I brought a snowball. I found a snowball.
Well, he was a moron. Come on.
It's too much. It's too much. I think it's too much. I think most of what the world that's out there that is even behind, Donald Trump or the Republican Party at the present time is saying it's too much. It's too much. We have to stop. We have to fall back on what we used to know. We have to go back to what we used to know, which is where I think most of the risk for women is. Because the one big change is that women are not staying at home, cooking the meal, taking the kids to school and being school moms. They're not. And then throw on top of that, when President Obama was the president and an African American was elected to the presidency, and in that same tenure of time, they legalized same-sex marriage. And now you're faced with people having to sit at the dinner table and maybe hearing that people can have sex changes. You take those three things alone and paint them into the American culture, and you can see why there is chaos and worry and fear about what is unknown. And the politician that can capture that can gather that fear up and promise, to put an end to what you're afraid of or to help you to be comfortable with it. I mean, listen, it's not about this political campaign, but when Donald Trump made his big speech as president, he said, "I alone can fix this.
That's right.
I
Yeah.
alone can fix it." And I want to know, fix what? Really? What are you going to do?
Yeah.
You're going to put our learning and what we know now about a person's sexual orientation, you can't put that back in the box. We know now. We understand what, you can't gather that up and put that in a container. You cannot take the experience of females in the contemporary culture and stuff them back into the box of the 1920s. You can't do it. We're here. We've arrived. And the question is, will we give each other space enough to work out new ethics? We need new ethics. We don't need old ones. We've got to work together to invent new ethics. What is ethical for children? Like, at what age do we really know that a child is in need of a sex change operation? Like, or is it just whatever, just do whatever you want to? No one wants to be that, I don't think. You know, we have, it's not that long ago, but, you know, we have two sets of men in our school who have children. You know, the families have two fathers. And out there in the public school world, they've been doing this for years, saying, you know, this guy's got two dads. But there's a lot of people that don't know anything about that.
Well, if the Christian right is so afraid of all of these things, then that means they're really not reading their Bible, because isn't the psalmist saying, I will not be afraid because I have God, I've put my faith in God? Where's the fearlessness of those people?
No, that's right. There is no fearlessness, and you cannot find it. What you find is fear. You find fear. You hear stories of degradation and decay, and, you know, this is the end of the world. It's fear. It's fear. And I think that the Church of Jesus Christ has failed categorically to be able to instill a faith that is about fearlessness, to welcome the future. Welcome it. God is with us. God will help us to understand and to grow together. It's not in their language. It's just not there. It's not. So, we're left with our fears.
If we would only stop being cruel to one another. I see a lot of this stuff just as plain cruelty.
Yeah.
It's just
Goes
very,
back to school, high school, the mean girls.
there you go. We don't know you, so we don't like you, so we're going to be mean to you.
The fear of the unknown.
Exactly.
Mm-hmm.
It goes back to fear. You know, you take these cocky, confident kids that are going to abuse and scare other people, and you look behind them in their psychology, and what do you find? You find a very frightened individual. You find a human being that is captivated by fear, and so they strike out against other human beings. I think it's true even of small wars that are fought in the world. These are groups of people who are convinced that they need to be afraid.
There always has to be the other.
So, where is God? When will God instill in our hearts a faith that casts out fear? Because where you find fearless people, you find people who are ready to decode the present, to form the new moralities, to define the new ethics.
Yeah, but I think it's when will we allow God
Right.
to
Yes.
instill it. Not that God is refusing to instill it, but we're refusing to accept that.
Yep. It's rather up to us. That's
Right.
it.
Yes, I agree with you. You know I agree with you. That is it. It's you
So
know,
we figured that out.
God.
We're good.
Yeah, you got it. God has been trying to instill fearlessness in human beings since the world began. God has been trying to show us to walk in faith and not fear, because every malady that comes our way comes because of our fear. It's a frightening world. Did you feel that wind yesterday?
Yeah.
It's frightening. You know, I was walking along the tree line of my backyard, and there's these 40-foot trees, and that wind is blowing, and I'm thinking, I got to get out of here. You know, these trees fall on people, and they kill them. So,
Yeah. Well, we had a power failure last night because a tree fell on a transformer. So we had, semi-power failure. It was weird. In one room, a light would be on, and the other room, it wouldn't be.
So,
So that was like otherworldly, I guess, extraterrestrial or whatever.
I'm gonna try out a new benediction for the end of the gathering. I'm gonna make it, be afraid, be very, very afraid. All right, my friends, I think that's our time for tonight. Thank you for coming and joining in. Thank you to those of you who are online and watching. Come and join us tomorrow morning, 10 o'clock, or tune in later on. God bless you. And do not be afraid.
Good night, everybody. Thank you.
Good night.
Good night.
Good night.
Trust in God. Amen. Good night.